How do you fix a non-conforming real estate parcel? Before we can answer that question, I need to remind you, what do we mean when I say a non-conforming parcel? What does that mean? So I'm going to try and remember to put a link in the description of this video on YouTube. We'll try and link to the other video where I talk about what a non-conforming parcel is. But just as a reminder, a non-conforming parcel is a parcel with an existing use or some physical characteristics that don't meet the requirements of the current land use regulations. Okay, so if you have a parcel that doesn't meet the requirements of the current land use regulations, it's non-conforming. So a couple notes about that definition. It's possible that you have more than one use of a property that is non-conforming, or there could be multiple reasons why the parcel doesn't conform. And usually when we're talking about failure to meet the land use regulations, that's typically the zoning. Could be other things, but it's usually the zoning. So what's an example of a parcel that doesn't meet the current land use regulations? So here's an example. You've got a parcel that is being used. It's got a building that's being used as a warehouse, but it's zoned industrial, and warehousing isn't one of the allowed uses in an industrial zone, and the building also violates the setback. Okay, so in that case, you have two reasons why the parcel is non-conforming. One is the primary use of the parcel doesn't comply with the zoning. The other is there's a violation of the setback. That's a physical characteristic of the property. So once you've identified that you've got a problem with conformance, and you've confirmed that, what do you do about it? So you get a zoning report, or you get an ALTA survey, or you hire a private land planner or land surveyor to help you with your due diligence before you purchase, and they come to you and they say, hey, this parcel doesn't comply with the current land use regulations. So what do you do with a non-conforming parcel? So there's 4 things you can do to fix a parcel that doesn't conform with the current land use regulations, and all of them are hard and all of them cost money. So it's not that non-conforming parcels, it's not that they can't be fixed. They can, but it's not something you just snap your fingers and do. So I'm going to give you four ways you could potentially fix a non-conforming parcel. Okay, so the first one is you remove the reasons for the non-conformance. Okay, so in the example I gave you about the warehouse parcel, in that case, you'd have to change the use. So you'd have to stop using it as a warehouse and start using it for an industrial use. And you'd have to move the building or move the property line, one of the two, to remove the encroachment. So that's the first thing you can do, is you change the use or physical characteristic of the property, the parcel, to bring it into conformance with the regulations. That is the one thing most buyers or current owners do not want to do. So usually if they're not in conformance, that's the last thing they want to do, but that is an option. Okay, the second thing you can do is you can go to your local jurisdiction in most places in California, and you can apply for a zoning variance. Okay, a zoning variance is a written permission from the local land use regulator to break the rules. I have been land surveying for a little over 20 years. I don't know that I was going to say, I don't know if I've ever seen a successful zoning variance. If I have, I could count the number of times I've seen that work on one hand. So it's usually very hard to get a zoning variance, but that's an option. You have to check out your local jurisdiction and see what the rules are. The third option is there are times when you can take a use that isn't strictly conforming to the land use regulations, and you can make it conforming by going to the agency and getting a permit. Okay, so those are called use permits or conditional use permits or land development permits. There's different names for them in different jurisdictions, but if you're not completely breaking the rules, if you're only kind of breaking the rules, then a lot of times you can go to the agency and get a permit. That usually requires a site plan and other work. The local land use regulator is going to issue conditions on the permit, but that's another option. Okay, the last option, the fourth one, is you can go and change the zoning. So you can get your parcel rezoned. Again, that's hard to do. It's not impossible, but it is hard. The more you want to change the zoning, the harder it becomes. So You might be able to get, for example, a parcel that's zoned light industrial to heavy industrial, but you're going to have a much harder time getting a parcel zoned heavy industrial zoned residential, right? That's going to be difficult. But that's another option. So again, you want to check out the rules at your local jurisdiction, local land use regulator. See, what's it going to take to get that done? What's the likelihood of success? So as I mentioned before, of those 4 options, let me just run down them again real quick. You can remove the reason for the non-conformance. You can get a zoning variance. You can get a permit, or you can change the zoning. Those are the 4 things you can do to fix a non-conforming parcel. None of those things are easy, cheap, or certain. So there's a certain amount of risk. There's a degree of risk with each of those options. None of them are guaranteed. And so that's why it's always better, if you're going to buy a parcel and you're doing your due diligence, it's always better to check for conformance with the land use regulations before you actually buy. Once you buy, you're stuck, and then you're going to be back to one of those 4 options, and none of those may be great options. So it's always better to find out ahead of time if your parcel's in conformance with the local land use regulations.